July 2nd, 1937, aboard the Coast Guard cutter Itasca, anchored off Howland Island in the middle of the Pacific. Chief radioman Leo Bellarts leans into his headset. He's listening for one specific aircraft, a silver, twin-engine Lockheed Electra, somewhere out over open water, flown by the most famous pilot in America. Her name is Amelia Earhart. Her navigator is Fred Noonan. Together, they are trying to fly all the way around the world. By this morning, they've already flown most of the way around the world. What's left is the single hardest leg of the entire trip. All morning, her voice has been coming through the radio, again and again, each transmission a little more urgent than the last.
We must be on you, but cannot see you. Gas is running low. We've been unable to reach you by radio. We are flying at 1,000 feet.
At 08:43, the final transmission anyone would ever receive from that aircraft comes through the speaker.
We are on the line 157337. We will repeat this message on 6210 kilocycles. We are running north and south.
Here is the detail almost nobody gets right about this moment. That signal was not fading. It was exactly as loud and clear as it had been all morning. Bellarts himself put it plainly, decades later. She was so loud, he said, that he ran up to the bridge, expecting to see her plane coming in for a landing. Nobody ever did see it. After that transmission, silence. To this day, nobody knows exactly what happened to Amelia Earhart or to Fred Noonan. You're watching Black Box Breakdown. Amelia Earhart. One honest rule before we start. Every timestamp and quote in this episode comes from the National Archives' own radio log or from a named, attributed source, where something is a theory and not a proven fact. And in this case, there are several. We will say so on screen every single time. To understand why an entire ocean got searched for this one woman, you have to understand who she already was. In June of 1928, Amelia Earhart became the first woman to cross the Atlantic by air, as a passenger aboard a Fokker trimotor named the Friendship, flown by pilot Wilma Stultz and mechanic Louis Gordon. She didn't fly it herself. The fame landed on her anyway, and it never really left. 4 years later, she fixed that herself. In May of 1932, she flew a red Lockheed Vega Solo across the Atlantic, only the second person ever to do it after Charles Lindbergh. 3 years after that, in January of 1935, she became the first person ever to fly solo across the Pacific. Honolulu to Oakland, 2,400 miles, a route that had already killed 10 aviators who tried it before her. That same year, Purdue University's president recruited her as a visiting faculty member with a documented official title, Counselor on Careers for Women. A Purdue trustee named David Ross helped raise money for something called the Amelia Earhart Fund for Aeronautical Research. Between his gift and a handful of corporate sponsors, it totaled around $80,000. The plane that money helped buy was publicly billed as a flying laboratory. New radio gear, new navigation instruments, wing de-icing equipment. How much of that was a real research program and how much was publicity is genuinely disputed. She took delivery of it from Lockheed's Burbank plant in July of 1936. A Lockheed Electra 10E, twin-engine, all-metal, 55 feet across the wings, with 10 fuel tanks holding over 1,100 gallons combined. Far more range than a stock Electra that size was ever built to carry. For a flight with no landmarks over open ocean, she needed a navigator who could handle it. She chose Fred Noonan. Noonan had spent years as a merchant seaman before he ever flew. By the early 1930s, he was one of Pan American Airways' leading oceanic navigators, the man who helped chart their first trans-Pacific clipper routes. Why Noonan actually left Pan Am is genuinely disputed. One account says he resigned to start his own navigation school. A separate, later account alleges he was let go over drinking, a claim that didn't surface publicly until decades afterward. On March 27, 1937, Noonan married Mary Martinelli, a hairdresser from Oakland. It was roughly 3 months before he disappeared. Getting into the air, even once, almost ended this flight before it began. The first attempt left Oakland on March 17, 1937. Earhart, Noonan, a second navigator named Harry Manning, and a technical advisor named Paul Mantz, flying west, Oakland toward Honolulu. 3 days later, taking off again from Luke Field on Ford Island, the heavily loaded Electra ground-looped on the runway. A blown tyre, uneven engine power, the exact cause disputed even then. Nobody was hurt. The airplane went back to Lockheed's Burbank plant for repair, and the whole plan was rebuilt from scratch. When it flew again, the route ran the opposite direction, partly for the season's winds. Manning and Mantz didn't continue. From here on, Noonan was the only navigator on board. The Electra left Oakland again on May 21st, 1937, working its way toward Miami for one final overhaul before the real flight began. On June 1st, 1937, the official world flight departure leaves Miami. Crowds gather to watch it go. From Miami, the route runs down through the Caribbean and South America. San Juan, Carapito in Venezuela, Paramaribo in Suriname, Brazil. Then, from Natal, the jump across open ocean, the South Atlantic crossing, landing next in St. Louis, Senegal. Then west to east across the width of Africa, Dakar, Gao in Mali, Fort Lamy in Chad, El Fasher and Khartoum in Sudan, Massawa and Assab on the Red Sea. Then across Asia, Karachi, Calcutta, Rangoon, Bangkok, Singapore, and on through Java, Timor and Darwin, Australia, until on June 29th, they touched down at Lae in New Guinea. By Lae, they have flown 22,000 of a planned 29,000 miles. What's left is the leg nobody else on this trip has come close to matching, 2,556 miles of open Pacific to a speck of an island called Howland. July 1st was supposed to be the day. Wrong direction winds and threatening clouds scrubbed the takeoff. They tried again the next morning. At around 10 a.m. local time on July 2nd, the heavily loaded Electra rolled down a grass airstrip barely 3,000 feet long, one that ended at a bluff, dropping into a shark-populated gulf. Ground crew who watched it happen remembered the plane could barely lift off, using, in their own words, every inch of runway and then some. A Guinea Airways employee named Alan Board took a photograph of that takeoff. It remains the last confirmed image ever taken of that aircraft. One detail is easy to miss. The day before, Noonan hadn't been able to set his marine chronometers against a radio time signal because of a radio problem at Lae, which meant the entire 2,500-mile crossing began with a small timing error already built in before the wheels ever left the ground. This brings us back to where this episode started, the radio shack aboard the Itasca. The Coast Guard cutter Itasca was stationed off Howland Island specifically to guide the Electra in by radio for the final approach of the entire round-the-world flight.
About 200 miles out. Please take a bearing on us. About 100 miles out now.
At 0742, the transmission you heard at the start of this episode comes through. Gas running low, flying at 1,000 feet, unable to reach Itasca by radio.
We are circling, but cannot hear you. We received your signals, but unable to get a minimum. Please take a bearing on us and answer on 3,105 with voice.
40 minutes later, at 0843, comes the transmission that would end up being the last one anyone ever received. This is the actual document, the Itasca's own radio log, written down in real time on July 2nd, 1937, held today at the National Archives. The now familiar wording of that final message, the version usually quoted in full, is a cleaned-up, typed reconstruction. The raw handwritten log underneath it is terser and in places harder to read.
We are on the line 157337. We will repeat this message on 6210 kilocycles. We are running north and south.
After that, nothing. No further transmission ever again from that aircraft. Somewhere over open water, past the point anyone could still hear her, the Electra's engines were running on fumes. Even the official record isn't perfectly clean. Itasca's own commanding officer, Commander Warner Thompson, later added details to his written report, like the weather being cloudy and overcast, that simply aren't in the original log. That 157-337 line is a compass heading from a sunline navigation technique Noonan used. Mathematically, it describes a line running northwest to southeast, passing near Howland Island. According to later celestial navigation analysis, that same line also happens to pass near a second island, roughly 350 nautical miles southeast of Howland, a speck of coral called Gardner Island. That the line intersects Gardner Island is simple math. That Earhart and Noonan actually flew it there and landed is not a confirmed fact. It's a theory. We'll get to it. When Itasca got no further contact, the United States launched one of the largest search operations in its history. The battleship USS Colorado, on a training cruise near Hawaii, was diverted and launched 3 scout float planes to search. Colorado's planes searched Winslow Reef, found nothing there at all, then flew over McKeon Island, uninhabited in the pilot's own words, except for, quote, myriads of birds. Then they flew over Gardner Island, the same island that line of position happens to pass through. The lead pilot, Lieutenant John Lambrecht, filed an official report. His report, on the record, signs of recent habitation were clearly visible, but repeated circling and zooming failed to elicit any answering wave. It was finally taken for granted that none was there. What that quote actually means for Earhart's fate is not something Lambrecht's report claims. That reading of it belongs to a theory we'll cover later in this episode. The quote itself is real. The meaning is not settled. Colorado's planes also swept Hull, Sydney, Phoenix, Enderbury, Burney and Canton Islands. Every one of them negative. The aircraft carrier USS Lexington joined next, with 62 planes aboard, sweeping over 100,000 square miles northwest of Howland in grid patterns 2 miles apart. Every single mission log from that search records some version of the same 2 words, nothing sighted. The search was called off on July 19, 1937. 16 days, about 9 ships, 66 aircraft, roughly 4,000 people. Over $4 million, close to $88 million today. No wreckage, no oil slick, no debris of any kind ever recovered. The Navy's official, contemporaneous conclusion: the Electra ran out of fuel, crashed, and sank. That finding, lost at sea, no wreckage ever found, remains the United States government's official position to this day. No US agency has ever revised it. One more official act followed, separately, 18 months later. On January 5th, 1939, a Los Angeles County court granted Amelia Earhart's legal death declaration at her husband George Putnam's request, granted unusually fast, which the judge himself called extraordinary. For nearly 90 years, one theory has outlasted every other explanation for what happened next. It belongs to a research group called TIGHAR, the International Group for Historic Aircraft Recovery, and specifically to its founder and executive director, Rick Gillespie. Gillespie's theory: Earhart and Noonan didn't crash at sea at all. They flew that 157-337 line southeast and landed on Gardner Island, today called Nikumaroro. Since 1988, TIGHAR has run around a dozen expeditions to that island looking for proof. What they've recovered: a fragment of aircraft-grade aluminum, part of a 1930s woman's shoe, a broken cosmetic jar, consistent with a popular freckle ointment of the era, a mirror compact, a pocket knife, an empty liquor bottle, a sextant box, since lost, with numbers stamped on it. Every single one of those items is described, carefully, as consistent with the era or consistent with what Earhart or Noonan might have carried. Not one of them has ever been proven to be theirs. Remember Lieutenant Lambrecht's report from that same island in 1937. Signs of recent habitation, but no one answering their wave? This is exactly the line TIGHAR points to. It's a real quote from a real official report. Whether it actually describes castaways rather than something else entirely is Gillespie's interpretation, not a Navy finding. In 1940, 3 years after the disappearance, something was actually found on that island. A British colonial officer named Gerald Gallagher discovered 13 human bones near an old campfire site on Nikumaroro. The bones were sent to Fiji for examination. A doctor named D.W. Hoodless studied them and concluded they belonged to a stocky, middle-aged man, not Amelia Earhart. TIGHAR rediscovered Hoodless's original report in the late 1990s and challenged his methods. In 2018, a forensic anthropologist named Richard Jantz ran the same original measurements through modern software. His statistical conclusion: those measurements were more consistent with Earhart than with 99% of a large reference population. Peer-reviewed, but a probability, not an identification. A separate 2015 paper by researchers named Cross and Wright defended Hoodless's original 1940 finding as methodologically sound. The two studies genuinely disagree. Here's the complication that will never go away. The bones themselves have been lost since the 1940s. No new physical test, no DNA, nothing is possible anymore. It's a permanent argument over 80-year-old measurements. In 2019, National Geographic sent forensic anthropologist Erin Kimmerly to examine those same measurements again and to attempt DNA testing against Earhart's own relatives. Her reconstructed skull was consistent with an adult female, matching, among other things, one of Earhart's known sinus features. But the DNA testing itself came back inconclusive. The samples were simply too degraded. Not a match, not a non-match. Inconclusive. Not every theory about this case has survived scrutiny. Two of them collapsed completely. The first, that Earhart and Noonan were captured by Japan and held somewhere in the Pacific. It's circulated since the 1960s with no solid documentary evidence behind it. In July of 2017, the History Channel aired a photograph it said showed Earhart and Noonan in Japanese custody on an atoll called Jaluit. Within about a week, a Japanese blogger named Kota Yamano found the identical photograph, published in a Japanese travel book from 1935, 2 years before Earhart ever disappeared. That specific photo is conclusively false, and no record since has ever produced credible evidence for the wider Japanese capture theory either. The second collapse theory is much more recent. In January of 2024, a company called Deep Sea Vision announced sonar imagery that looked like a twin-engine aircraft on the Pacific floor. It made headlines everywhere. 10 months later, the same team revisited the site and identified the shape as a natural rock formation, not the Electra. The company's own CEO, Tony Romeo, later admitted, self-deprecatingly, that it probably wasn't the plane after all. As recently as this decade, this case has kept generating fresh headlines. In September of 2025, the US government ordered the declassification of every Earhart-related government record still held back. The National Archives began releasing pages in waves, 4,624 pages that September, then thousands more across November, December, and January. What's actually in them? Final radio transmissions, weather data, search records, internal Navy investigations, and some genuine period ephemera, like a self-described 1937, quote, telepath, claiming psychic knowledge of the crash. A television host named Ross Coulthart covered the release, framing the documents as challenging the official search's, quote, tunnel vision. That's real journalism on a real release. But no outlet, anywhere, has reported an actual smoking gun finding inside those documents. As of this recording, there isn't one. Then there's the TIGHAR object, a shape on the floor of Nikumaroro's own lagoon, first spotted on satellite imagery back in 2020 by a retired Navy veteran named Mike Ashmore. CNN gave it fresh attention in October of 2025. An organization called the Archaeological Legacy Institute, led by Richard Pettigrew, partnered with Purdue University to plan an expedition. That expedition has already been postponed twice. As of this recording, it has not left port, and it has found nothing, because it hasn't gone yet. Even Rick Gillespie, the man who spent decades chasing the Nikumaroro theory, has publicly said he sees nothing there consistent with wreckage, his own guess, a downed coconut tree. One more thing worth saying plainly. A video went viral in January of 2026, claiming the mystery was finally solved. No primary source anywhere backs that claim up. As of this recording, the case remains officially unresolved. Take stock of everything this case actually has. A radio log with one loud, urgent, final transmission. A search the size of Texas that found nothing at all. A navigational line that happens to touch an island. Bones nobody can retest. And 90 years of theories, none of them proven. That combination, real evidence, genuinely inconclusive, sitting right next to a story people desperately want an ending for, is exactly why this case has never stopped generating headlines. In October of 2026, another expedition returns to that same lagoon. If a story that ends in total silence unsettled you, wait until you see what really happened to Malaysia Airlines Flight 370, a Boeing that vanished the exact same way, 77 years later, with radar data this time, and still no wreckage. That's our episode, MH370, the plane that vanished from Earth, right here on this channel. Subscribe to Black Box Breakdown for the investigations everyone else got wrong.
If this one got under your skin a little, good. That's the point. And it only keeps happening because people like you keep showing up.
So do one thing for me. Hit subscribe. It is free, and it is the whole reason Black Box can keep taking these disasters apart.